The brutal beauty of Cormac Mccarthy's Blood Meridian. The Western by the author who died Tuesday perfectly encapsulates his trademarks: riveting prose, unflinching portrayals of violence and all-too-human reckonings with mortality. It took Cormac McCarthy a decade to write Blood Meridian. Mr. McCarthy, who died at age 89 on Tuesday, pursued this bleak Western with the same obsessiveness that he did all his writing, moving to the American Southwest in the mid-70s to aid his research and enduring poverty to dedicate time to his art, a burden that would be eased thanks to a 1981 MacArthur Fellowship. When the novel was published 4 years later, it was notably his first to be set in the West and, even for Mr. McCarthy, who had already put out 4 hard-edged books, notably violent. Critics were divided. The book sold fewer than 2,000 copies, and most of its first edition was remaindered. It took a decade or so until readers began to appreciate the greatness of this work, a harrowing struggle between notions of fate and free will, and in my view one of the most profound novels in the English language. The plot is as straightforward as it is grisly. A runaway adolescent known only as the Kid heads west and in 1849 joins the murderous Glanton gang, scalp hunters who are enlisted to kill threatening Apaches but soon expand their quarry to include all sorts of innocents, then spends much of the story traversing barren deserts and committing unspeakable acts of horror. John Joel Glanton and his debauched marauders were a real group, and Mr. McCarthy based much of the book on the accounts of Samuel Chamberlain, who published a memoir about his time with them. Why would someone want to read a novel whose graphic acts of brutality make Hieronymus Bosch's paintings look like a children's coloring book? A simple answer is Mr. McCarthy's writing. Without question, he was one of the best stylists of the 20th century, stripping punctuation to its studs, embracing diction archaic and mellifluous, apt to reduce sentences to the fewest possible words but unafraid to let them gallop along at full tilt when they needed to. A dying man lets out a howl of such outrage as to stitch a caesura in the pulse beat of the world. Parties passing in the night are pursuing as all travelers must inversions without end upon other men's journeys. Amid this gripping prose, Blood Meridian grounds itself in man's preoccupation with the inevitability of death. Yes, carnage surrounds the characters and killings are handed out without a second thought by characters ranging from the psychotic Judge Holden, the closest thing the novel has to a flesh-and-blood antagonist, to the still religious ex-priest Tobin. And yet, hardened as these men are, the clawing knowledge of mortality still eats at them. The ultimate destination of man is unspeakable and calamitous beyond reckoning. Like all of ours, their deaths are fait accompli from the moment they are born. In life, they are a ghost army who sleep among the dead, experiencing but a brief interregnum between periods of non-existence. So how is that brief moment of life directed? If Melville, with whom Mr. McCarthy is frequently compared and whose Moby Dick is often cited as a precursor to Blood Meridian, explored man's search for meaning through a romantic, post-Enlightenment lens, then Mr. McCarthy does it through a nihilistic, post-Nietzschean one. Here, free will and fate grapple in a seemingly unresolvable conflict that plays out against a godless landscape of savagery. Early on, the harshness of this world is said to try whether the stuff of creation may be shaped to man's will or whether his own heart is not another kind of clay, whether we control our destiny or our destiny controls us. An argument for the latter is a pivotal fortune-telling scene where a group of performers prophesy with particularly accurate detail the gruesome end many in the group will face. The judge, on the other hand, is militant in his pursuit of control, documenting everything from plants and animals to ancient markings and colonial relics in a ledger he carries in the belief that by singling out the thread of order from the tapestry, he will effect a way to dictate the terms of his own fate. It is in the novel's lurid violence that these opposing epistemological views are reconciled. The judge explains the paradox in mystical terms: war is the truest form of divination. It is the testing of one's will and the will of another within that larger will which because it binds them is therefore forced to select. War is the ultimate game because war is at last a forcing of the unity of existence. War is God. For the believers in predestination, their survival or slaying in every skirmish is written in the stars. For the acolytes of autonomy, the battlefield is the ultimate testing ground to gauge the wisdom or foolishness of their decisions. In Mr. McCarthy's Badlands, all tenets are subsumed by bloodshed. The brutal beauty of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. The Western by the author who died Tuesday perfectly encapsulates his trademarks: riveting prose, unflinching portrayals of violence and all too human reckonings with mortality. It took Cormac McCarthy a decade to write Blood Meridian. Mr. McCarthy, who died at age 89 on Tuesday, pursued this bleak Western with the same obsessiveness that he did all his writing, moving. As Trump is arrested, Republicans honor the insurrectionists. Donald Trump could not have asked for a nicer Arraignment Day celebration. During the very same hour in which the former president surrendered to federal authorities in Miami, his Republican allies in the House were, in their most visible and official way yet, embracing as heroes and martyrs the people who sacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021, in hopes of overturning Trump's election defeat. In the Capitol complex, Representative Matt Gaetz, Republican Florida, with sidekick Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Georgia, and 4 other far-right lawmakers, held a hearing that honored participants in the riot, family members of January 6 rioters and organizers of the attempted overthrow of the 2020 vote. Technically, Gaetz couldn't call such a hearing, because he isn't a committee chairman. But House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who is trying to win back the support of extremists such as Gaetz, let it happen anyway. Gaetz did his all to make the proceedings look official. There were congressional seals on his nameplate and on the big screen behind him. A meeting room in the Capitol Visitor Center was arranged to appear like a committee room, with lawmakers facing the witnesses. Gaetz advertised the field hearing as part of how the 118th Congress is investigating the weaponization of the federal government. He impersonated a chairman: "You are recognized, thank you for your testimony, I'll recognize myself, for questions, her time has expired," and the others played along: "Thank you for the opportunity to testify, I yield back." Gaetz said testimony could be used for the official record of the House or for work in the Judiciary Committee, upon which I serve, or the Oversight Committee. C-SPAN carried the proceedings live. The invited witnesses: the wife of Ronald McAbee, who is awaiting trial for allegedly attacking a police officer and dragging him into the mob while wearing a black vest that said "Sheriff." Underwear model John Strand, sentenced to 2 years and 8 months for being part of the mob that breached the Capitol on January 6 and pushed past police officers. Activist Brandon Straka, sentenced to home detention and probation and fined for his January 6 actions. The aunt of Matthew Perna committed suicide while awaiting sentencing for his role in breaching the Capitol. Ed Martin, an organizer of the Stop the Steal effort leading up to January 6. And Jeffrey Clark, the Trump Justice Department official who tried to get states to toss the election results. The lawmakers hailed them all. "To all of you, my condolences," said Representative Paul Gosar, Republican Arizona,